Hello guys, how are you all doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back, and today, as weird as it sounds, I want to discuss Metroid Other M. So I know Metroid Other M, of course, does not have the best reputation. It's a weird game in the Metroid franchise because, for the most part, the franchise is one of the highest rated, highest reviewed, and most beloved franchises in gaming, and definitely for Nintendo. Yet Other M kind of represents one of the few sort of black spots on the legacy of the series. It's a game that had a lot of hype when it released for the Wii in 2010, and by the time it released and reviewed and people bought it and played it, not too many people were happy with the final product. Now, I myself, of course, maintain that I am a huge fan of the game. If you're familiar with me, you've seen the poster behind me in all of my different videos, of course. See? Look at it. And you know that I wear that Other M fanship with pride. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm totally proud of it. I think it's a really darn good Metroid action Samus-focused game. I really, really do. Obviously, they didn't execute a lot of their big ideas the best. They tried a little too hard in some of the wrong areas. Maybe there were a lot of elements that they thought sounded good on paper, and when it came time to executing them, I'll still admit there's a lot of things that they didn't execute properly. There is no doubt. It is definitely not the best Metroid game. I recently ranked all 13 currently released games, and I put the game at number 9, so it's clearly not near the top of my list. But that doesn't mean, as its own game, and as its own Metroid game, that it's actually bad, because I'm telling you guys, I think the game is really good. And so that brings me to the main point of this video, and that's whether or not it makes sense for Other M to be revived on the Nintendo Switch. And now, I know, I get it, especially if you're new to the channel or this is the first video of mine that you've stumbled across. As soon as you heard that I'm a fan of Other M, you're probably like yelling at your computer or your phone. You're like, oh my god, you're just a maniac, you're crazy, who could like that game? It's terrible, and so you're just an idiot and you don't know what you're talking about. And hey, that's fine, man. If that's you, if that's how you feel, it's your opinion, you have the right to feel that way. But this is my channel, and I want to talk about my opinion, and as a fan of the game, that's why I think it's interesting to explore what could happen with this game, and if it would make sense for Nintendo to ever do something with this series or the idea of Other M again. And so that's what had me looking at the original actual release, the current Wii 2010 game. We've seen Nintendo start to do a lot more with the Metroid franchise the last couple of years. Federation Force came out in 2016, and I know it's not a good game and everyone hates it and yada yada, and I think that there are problems with that game as well. But it was still a Metroid game they released one year. Last year, they then gave us Samus Returns, and right now we know we're also waiting for Metroid Prime 4. So the reason I talk about that, and I even have to lump Federation Force into this conversation, is because we've seen several years in a row where Nintendo is acknowledging the Metroid series again, and specifically Samus-focused games with Samus Returns and Prime 4. Obviously, one of the big problems with Federation Force was the lack of Samus and the focus on co-op and all of that weird stuff. It's not a terrible game, you know, you've heard me say that, but it's not the Metroid game we wanted it to be. And so, we have Nintendo being willing to acknowledge, man, people really love that Metroid, they really love Samus, and they've been wanting more of it for a long time, so here's a couple of Samus games to get you excited. Well, what if they want to do more with the series in the Switch era to continue that sort of support and love for Metroid? So obviously when we think of that, one of the first things we all think of is, of course, the Metroid Prime trilogy. I've talked about it so many times on podcasts, on Twitter, and on many of my own videos, sometimes focused specifically on this idea. I believe that the Prime trilogy will get some sort of re-release or remaster on the Nintendo Switch. It makes too much sense to not do, and I firmly believe it's going to happen. It could be a physical release, it could be a digital-only release, it could just be a straight port with no enhancements, or they could do the awesome thing and sort of kind of remaster it, or at least remaster it in HD. Just to do something to kind of flash and glitz it up, and they could sell it for a new $60 package, easily retail, and make a killing on it. So that's the first thing we think of. If they want to do something else to support Metroid and Samus between the releases of Samus Returns and whenever the hell Prime 4 is going to come out, release that Prime trilogy. But what about Other M? Let's get back to the main game we're talking about, the really polarizing game that so many of you guys hate, and I totally understand why. What about Other M? Is that a game that makes sense for Nintendo to revive also? And clearly, you know my answer is going to be yes. I absolutely think there could be a future life for this game, and another chance for Nintendo to sort of put it out there and give people the ability to either rediscover it or discover it for the first time. And a lot of people, I think, might be surprised that it might not be as bad as some of the internet vitriol over the years has told them that it is. Of course, a lot of people probably would play it and say, oh yeah, this is as bad as I heard, or maybe people who've always hated it will say, yeah, I still hate that game and so I don't want to have anything to do with it. And again, that's cool, man. Everyone's got their own opinions. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. But I do think that there is that huge opportunity to give it a new life and possibly reach a new fan base that a lot of people, so many years later, might be a little bit more receptive to it. And we start to think about how could it make sense for Nintendo to revive Other M. If they were going to do it, I kind of see it being something that might happen after Prime 4, because personally, I like the idea of the trilogy getting a re-release sometime before Prime 4 comes out, and then Prime 4 would come out, and then sometime after that, maybe do something with Other M. Now, I could see 3 ways where it would be really interesting and also kind of possible, something I think Nintendo might do, as far as how they might re-release Other M. The obvious couple of answers, they could just do a straight port, maybe even digital only, take the exact Wii game with no enhancements, and release a digital copy that you could buy on the eShop for like, I don't know, whatever, 20 or 30 bucks, or whatever price they wanted to sell it for. So that's one option. I think that would be the least exciting and probably get the least amount of people interested in picking it up, but it's an option and something that I could realistically see them doing. The other option is, again, similar to the trilogy kind of conversation, they could do a bit of a remaster and also make that game in HD, because let's be real, the game is beautiful. For running on 2010 Wii tech, the game looks fantastic. That is undeniable, even if you hate everything else about it. The graphics and the visuals are awesome. And so if they gave it an HD shine and then brought it over in like a physical package, again, just like the trilogy, I think that would be a huge boon, and a lot of people would be interested in wanting to check it out, or even give it a second shot too. So, you know, another full $50 or $60 retail package with an HD remaster, maybe with a couple of new things thrown into the game, that would be great and very exciting. It would make me happy, and I think people would be interested. And then there's kind of like my fanboy wish list pick, and this is something that probably is impossible because it would just be too good to be true, but I'm going to talk about it with you guys anyway. And what if they wanted to do something like a Super Metroid trilogy pack sort of re-release? And when I say that, the reason I mentioned Super Metroid is the canon and the timeline of Metroid kind of ends with what I like to call the Super Metroid trilogy, where Super Metroid releases as Metroid 3, then Other M takes place immediately after Super Metroid. And then you meet Adam Malkovich, you go through that whole weird, crazy, melodramatic, over-the-top, dumb story that they tell with Samus and Malkovich in that game. You know, I'll admit it's pretty dumb and ridiculous, but it is what it is. That happens, that game ends, and spoiler alert, Malkovich sacrifices himself. And then, immediately following that, in the timeline, that's where Metroid Fusion picks up, and Samus is dealing with her memories of Adam Malkovich and what he meant to her and what happened, and she's talking about it through computer logs and all these crazy things, and that game plays out, and it's over. Metroid Fusion, by the way, being Metroid 4, so you get Super Metroid as Metroid 3, Other M is like Metroid 3.5, and then Metroid Fusion as Metroid 4. And so those 3 games represent the most current, up-to-date, and farthest in the timeline that exists for Metroid. Like, the story of Samus has gone nowhere past Fusion chronologically. And how cool would it be if Nintendo released like a Super Metroid pack that came with Super Metroid and Other M, hopefully redone in HD, you know, maybe that, maybe not, and then Fusion? What if they just put all 3 of those games on a package and just made it that story succinctly from beginning to end? I think that would be amazing, and it would sell like gangbusters on the Switch. Could you imagine having access to all 3 of those games and that whole kind of final trilogy storyline on the Switch? Not only could you play them on your TV, hopefully in HD for Other M, but also you could take them on the go on the Switch. Oh my god, I want Super Metroid portably so bad, and Other M portably gets very exciting as well. It's like, I don't know, man, it just would be really cool, and I just want to think something like that could happen. Anywho, hey, let's come back to reality, because like I said, that's my fanboy wish list kind of pick. That's not realistically going to happen. It was fun to discuss. I'm sure it got a lot of you guys excited just thinking about it, but let's be real. They're probably not going to do that. If there was a reason for them to bring Other M over, it's going to be one of those first two options. Just a straight digital-only port or a physical HD re-release, whatever the case. That's what I think they might do. And so why do I think it would be a good idea? Let's wrap this up here. Why do I think it would be kind of cool or smart for Nintendo to do this? Kind of like I already alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, I think that the game could have a shot at a second life. And I think a second life for the game, a true revival, really could be successful, because a lot of times people need time away from things that they maybe don't like or things that have a bad reputation. It's a weird phenomenon that us as humans go through. I don't care if you're talking about a movie, a TV show, a video game, a book, whatever. Sometimes something comes out, people don't like it, they think it's dumb or poor quality, but years later, once we get through that honeymoon period of hate, and it's suddenly just an experience that's in our collective consciousness in history, suddenly we can revisit it and look at it as kind of what it is and see more of what it did well than what it did poorly. And again, I love Other M, but there's a lot of things it does poorly. I think it does a lot of good things better, but there are things it does do fairly poorly and not that well. But I think that a lot of that might actually wear off after time, and people might be willing to rediscover it. And here's the thing. While I think that obviously a huge portion of the fan base would buy a revived Other M just because they've never played it and they want to actually see what it's like and have a new Metroid experience they've never played, I also think that a lot of the people who outright hate the game, I would say about half and half. Half of the people would probably go nowhere near it because they never want to try it again. And I'm telling you, I think about half of the people who think they hate it would at least give it a shot again. They'd be willing to pick it up. They want to support Metroid. They want to support Nintendo. And I'm sure that a lot of people might have this hope in the back of their heads like, hey, maybe this game isn't as bad as I remember. Maybe I've been harsh on it all these years. Maybe if I revisit it again on the Switch, I might find that it's better than I remember. And if Nintendo offers enough enhancements to the game, I think that a lot of those people might be pleasantly surprised. Sure, some people are probably always going to feel this way and be like, nope, I still hate this game. But I think a lot of people might realize, hey, in wanting to complete my collection and support Metroid and give Other M a second chance, you know, here on the Switch era, I've discovered it's great, and I actually like this game. Or even if it's not great, I've discovered that it's okay, and it's fine, and I'm glad I played it again, and I'm glad I own a Switch copy of this, and it's not as bad as I remember. I think that that's what Other M could do. Not to mention keeping some of the support for Metroid and Samus alive, even though it's a game people hate. I think that whether it was sandwiched right before or right after Prime 4 or whatever they might do, I really think that it would go to show that Nintendo still acknowledges Samus and Metroid matter, and people care about the franchise, and we don't want it to go away. We don't want any more Metroid droughts. And a lot of care and love went into Other M. Even if the product didn't really deliver in the end, there is a lot of love that went into crafting that experience, from the gameplay and the beautiful CG cutscenes and the action and just the bottle ship that you traverse through. It's really a really neat experience. If you don't go in looking for something that's Super Metroid or Prime levels of like revolutionary, oh my god, amazing, it becomes just a pretty good Metroid action game that's like a 7.5. The game's like, for me, I like it enough to give it like an 8.5, but in reality, it's really more like a 7 or a 7.5 kind of experience. But that's not terrible. And it's even less terrible when Samus is the one starring in the game. And so, I don't know. That's why I think a revival of Other M could make sense on the Switch. Alright, so that's what I have to say about this. Just a random theory that's been in my head for a couple of weeks. A couple of people have been bringing up Other M to me on Twitter, and it got my brain thinking, and I was like, you know what? Let's just record this conversation, man. I have a lot to say about this. So, I'm going to say, bring on the hate. I know I'm getting hate in this video. I know everyone's going to yell at me and be, oh, Other M's terrible. You're stupid if you like it. I can't trust your opinion, yada, yada, blah, 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 whatever. Like, again, you have the right to that opinion. You can yell at me all you want in the comments. I can take it. I don't mind. I stand by my fanship of the game. But beyond that, I would also like to hear from you guys what you actually think. Whether you already love the game or hate the game, or if you've maybe never played it and have always been curious, what do you think about the idea? In this era of Nintendo where they seem to be supporting Metroid, does it make sense for them to revive Other M and to bring that game back over to the Switch? Is it something you'd like to see? Do you think they should just leave it dead and buried forever and just forget the game ever happened? Obviously, I don't want that, but I'm curious if some of you guys feel that way. So please, Discuss Metroid Other M below. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on this idea because I think there's something to it. God damn it. As a Metroid superfan, I think there's something there, man. So I just want to hope that it can happen. Anywho, that's what I have to say about that for today. Of course, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I always appreciate it. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.